Hey guys, I talk a lot about breathing. And the reason is because I think it's very important. Now, obviously breathing is important, right? Because we need to breathe in order to live. But I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Some people breathe better than others. Some people just can't breathe correctly. Like some people have really enlarged tonsils and they have some sort of obstruction in their airway. Some people have allergies and they just can't breathe properly in general. Sometimes people have sleep issues and they have what's called sleep disordered breathing. And that means they basically have some sort of obstruction in their airway when they're trying to sleep. And this can cause things like sleep apnea. So one way we can really improve our breathing is to start using our nose. Now, it's no secret that humans were meant to breathe through their nose. And I actually dive into this more in some of my other videos, and I'm gonna put a link to some of those in the description below. But basically, our nose has a lot of built-in features that benefit us, and we don't get any of these features from our mouth. For example, our nose can filter our air really well. And actually, our nose will filter out about 98 to 99% of viruses and bacteria. So you're a lot less likely to get sick when you're a nose breather. But also, we find that mouth breathers tend to have a lot of skeletal deformities as opposed to nose breathers. A lot of these deformities have to do with their face in general. So people who breathe through their mouth tend to have longer, skinnier faces. They tend to have narrower jaws. They tend to have more crooked teeth. They tend to have misaligned teeth. And also their posture is bad. So people who breathe through their mouth tend to have their head tilted forward more often and their shoulders rolled forward. So what is the reason behind all this? I mean, how come the way that you breathe affects so many other things? Well, let's look into why people breathe through their mouth in the first place. So really, there are 5 major reasons people breathe through their mouth. So the first reason people breathe through their mouth is they have what's called a tongue tie. Now, a tongue tie is basically when your tongue is glued to the floor of your mouth. So normally you have this attachment that's connecting the floor of your mouth to your tongue. But sometimes that attachment is really long. And when that's the case, when the attachment is too long, you can't really move your tongue that well. You don't have that freedom to move your tongue. So usually, if it's a newborn, the doctors will look for this, and if they see a tongue tie, they'll clip it so that the baby will have some sort of movement with their tongue. But sometimes this is missed or something else happens, and later on in life, you still have this tongue tie. Now, what is the issue with the tongue tie? So again, with the tongue tie, your tongue is basically glued to the floor of your mouth. And it doesn't have that much freedom, so it can't touch the roof of your mouth. So what happens is, one, it's basically pulling your head forward, right? Because your tongue has a lot of muscles that are attached to it. And some of those muscles will attach to your jaw, and some of them will attach to your neck muscles. So what happens is, when your tongue is against the floor of your mouth, it's basically pulling your lower jaw open and forcing it to stay open. So that one will reinforce people to breathe through their mouth, right? Because their mouths will already be open. But also, since your jaw is open, all that weight is basically pulling your head forward. And when your head starts falling forward, that's when your shoulders will roll forward, and that's what will reinforce this bad posture. So actually, there's an exercise you can do, and this will basically give yourself a natural neck lift, and it involves your tongue. So I'm gonna put a link to that video in the description below where I went over that. But even when you don't have a tongue tie and you still have this freedom with your tongue, some people will still have their mouths open. And there are certain things that will reinforce this by keeping either our tongue down or our tongue against the roof of our mouth. For example, one thing is breastfeeding. So breastfeeding will actually reinforce us to keep our tongue to the roof of our mouth. And this just has to do with the anatomy of how a baby will get breast milk from their mom. Now compare this to a baby sucking their thumb, or sipping a pacifier, or sipping from a bottle. All of these things will enforce the tongue to be down. And the reason is, all these objects are so big and there's no room for the tongue to really sit on top of it. So it's basically forcing that tongue to sit down. So if a baby is constantly using this, over time that will keep this tongue down position reinforced, and that could become one of the reasons that someone becomes a mouth breather later on. The second reason people become mouth breathers is they have problems with their nose. So this could be a lot of things, like if you ever break your nose and you have a deviated septum, or you're just born with a deviated septum, then it's gonna be really hard for you to breathe through your nose. And another reason people don't breathe through the nose is they have a lot of nasal congestion, a lot of sinus issues, or a lot of allergies. Now, the funny thing is that if you already have nasal congestion and all these allergies, breathing through your mouth will only make this all worse. So really, the best way to overcome this is to start breathing through your nose again. Now, you might be wondering, how is that even possible? Like, how can I start breathing through my nose again, especially if I already have allergies or all these nasal congestion problems? Well, I'm actually gonna go over that later in this video, so make sure you stick till the end. Number 3, the third reason people will breathe through their mouth is they have some sort of airway blockage. For example, they have really enlarged tonsils, they have really large adenoids, and something you'll see actually is people will have their tonsils and their adenoids removed a lot. And This is actually really common in mouth breathers. And the reason is, when you breathe through your mouth, you actually are more prone to getting tonsil and adenoid infections. And one of the reasons for this is when you breathe through your nose, your body actually naturally produces nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is both a vasodilator and also an antibacterial. That means it'll fight off bacteria. So your whole upper respiratory area will be a lot more clean when you're a nose breather, because you're producing this nitric oxide that can fight off all these infections from happening. Now, when you're a mouth breather, one, you're not gonna have any of this nitric oxide, but also you're gonna have a much more dry mouth and a much more dry throat in general, because when you're a mouth breather, you're drying up all the saliva that's in your mouth. So that's also gonna make you a lot more prone to getting more bacteria in your mouth and more prone to getting these infections. Number 4, the fourth reason people will breathe through their mouth is they just have a ton of allergies. Now, we already talked a little bit about this, but people who have allergies will tend to breathe a lot more through their mouth because they just can't breathe through their nose, right? It's just blocked all the time. And number 5, the last reason people tend to be mouth breathers is it's just habitual. You don't have to have any sort of like anatomy deficiency or some other problem to start breathing through your mouth. You can literally just be a kid, and when you watch your parents, if your parents are mouth breathers, you will sort of copy them, right? And this is how you habitually learn as a kid to start breathing through your mouth, because you see other people doing it. So that being said, how do you switch over from mouth breathing to nose breathing? Well, the first step is to just be aware. How do you know even if you are a mouth or a nose breather? Some people will know, some people can catch themselves. Like next time you go for a walk, check yourself. Are you breathing through your mouth or your nose? Or next time you're just relaxing, like watching TV or watching one of my videos, you can see if your mouth is open or if your mouth is closed and you're breathing through your nose. Okay, so let's say you are a mouth breather. How do I stop breathing through my mouth? First thing is check and see if you're even able to breathe through your nose in the first place. Sometimes you can't. Like again, if you have a deviated septum, it's gonna be really hard for you to breathe through your nose. And you might have to get a surgery done in order to fix this. But let's say that you don't have a deviated septum and you're struggling breathing through your nose because your nose is clogged. One thing you might have tried is using a nasal spray. Now those are great because in the short term, then your nose will be open and you can start breathing again. But again, over time, your nose will start to get more and more clogged again, and then again, you're gonna start breathing through your mouth again. So do you remember that technique I was gonna show you to help your unclogged nose and to start breathing through your nose again? We're gonna go over that now. So if you have a really stuffy nose, or you have a cold or something, and you wanna start breathing through your nose again, the first thing you have to do is use a nasal spray. So we already talked about this a little bit. Put the nasal spray in each nostril and make sure, at least temporarily, that you're able to get air in through your nose. Next, what you have to do is what's called the chicken nod exercise. Now, this is gonna look really weird, but there's a couple of reasons for this that it actually works. One is that you're actually increasing the circulation in your nose and your head area. But also, it has to do with these receptors that are in your brain. So you basically have these two receptors that are in your brain. So one receptor basically determines if you're breathing through your mouth or your nose. And the other receptor will basically assume that you're breathing through your nose. So this second receptor that's in your brain, if you are a mouth breather, it'll detect that you're releasing a lot more carbon dioxide than you're supposed to, right? Because when you breathe in, you're taking in oxygen, and when you breathe out, you're releasing CO2, or carbon dioxide. Now, when you're a mouth breather, your mouth hole is way bigger than your nose holes, right? So you're taking a lot shorter, quicker breaths. And that means that you're not only inhaling oxygen really quickly, but you're also releasing carbon dioxide really quickly. And what your body does is it realizes that you're releasing way too much carbon dioxide, and it wants to slow this down because both carbon dioxide and oxygen are really important in our body. And it's really important that we have this like homeostasis between our carbon dioxide and our oxygen levels. So if one is too high or one is too low, then our body will start to take measures in order to fix this. So if our carbon dioxide levels are dropping way too fast, what our body does is it stimulates our nose to produce more mucus. So this is what's gonna start blocking our nose more in order to block air from getting out of our nose. But the problem is you're still breathing through your mouth. So this is just gonna have a never-ending cascade because you're always gonna have this mucus in your nose. This is why breathing through your mouth will make you more likely to have all these allergies, all these sinus problems, and all this congestion. So again, what we just did was we used a nasal spray to help open up our nasal passages, right? The next thing you have to do is the chicken nod exercise. I know you guys have been waiting for this. So all it is you put one finger over your mouth and you take a quick breath through your nose, right? So you're keeping the finger over your mouth so that you stop breathing through your mouth. And then after you take the quick breath through your nose, you start bobbing your head back and forth, right? And this is what's increasing that circulation. But also when you're bobbing your head, you're keeping your fingers over your nose. So you have one finger over your mouth and one hand over your nose. And you're basically holding your breath. Now, what does that do? Well, it's actually increasing the carbon dioxide in your body. And that's telling your body like, hey, we need to stop producing so much mucus. We need to get rid of some of this mucus so that this guy can start breathing through his nose again. And really, this is really quick. You don't have to do this that many times. You can do this like 3 to 5 times, and you'll notice that you can start breathing through your nose again. So I'm gonna demonstrate it now. So again, one finger over your mouth, and then you take a quick breath through your nose, and I'll start. So you keep doing that back and forth head nod motion, and you keep that up until you have to take a breath. And when you have to take a breath, you don't use your mouth, you use your nose. And again, we use a nasal spray before this, so we know that our nose is working, right? So again, you do this like 3 to 5 times, and after you're done, your nasal passages should be pretty clear. But wait, there is one last step. You wanna make sure that this works, and you wanna make sure that you're gonna start breathing through your nose again, right? So the last thing you have to do is you have to tape your mouth shut. Now I know what you're thinking, this might sound barbaric, this might sound like crazy, but this is really the only way to make sure that you can start breathing through your nose again. So a really good time to do this is right before you go to sleep. And if your wife or your husband is looking at you like you're crazy, try to get them to do it too. Maybe show them this video. But quick tip, make sure you don't use duct tape. You don't want to use something super strong. There's actually something out there called micropore paper tape, and this is basically like a softer tape. It's more gentle for your skin, and it's not gonna hurt you. This is also another way to check if you're even a mouth breather or nose breather in the first place. Because let's say you wake up in the middle of the night and this tape is off, and you start breathing through your mouth again. Well, that's a clear sign that you're a mouth breather. And another way you might find that you're a mouth breather is if you start having a great night of sleep all of a sudden. Like if you tape your mouth shut and you wake up the next day and you feel all rejuvenated, like you've never slept like that before, well, you're probably a mouth breather because that's the first time you've breathed through your nose all night. Again, I'm putting more videos in the description below where I go over why you should even be breathing through your nose in the first place, and you can learn about all the benefits you get from breathing through your nose. We went over a couple of them in this video, but there are a ton of them, guys. Now, if you start doing this and it starts working, some other things you can help reinforcing nose breathing is one, getting a tongue tie surgery. So again, we talked about if your tongue is glued to the floor of your mouth. If you cannot put your tongue to the roof of your mouth, then that's gonna be really hard for you to breathe through your nose all day. The reason is because when our tongue is against the roof of our mouth, it's basically blocking us from breathing through our mouth, right? And also it's holding our lower jaw up. Now, again, we talked a little bit before about if you are a mouth breather, how this can cause a bad posture. Because if your tongue is against the floor of your mouth, it's pulling your head forward. Now, if your tongue is against the roof of your mouth, now it's pulling your lower jaw up, it's keeping your lips closed, and it's also reinforcing that good head posture where your head is in line with your spine. Again, I'm putting more links in the description below, so make sure you guys check those out, and you can learn more about mouth breathing, more about nose breathing, and more about different exercises you can do to help get a better posture. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked that video, and if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel below. I will see you in the next video.